Hello everybody, my name's DC Rockwell and this is Automate All the Things. Tonight we are talking to Alex. He is a Code Day organizer and a software programmer, and he's going to be talking to us about what Code Day what a Code Day is about, what you do at an event where you're supposed to write code, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about how to organize your own situation. Or I'm sorry, guys, my mic seems to be really loud on the VU, so I apologize and let me know if I'm clipping. But yeah, we're going to be talking about what it goes into an event organization for Code Day. So if you want to start your own sort of code event in your area, he can give you tips on how to do that, where to find the funding and stuff like that, I presume. And we'll also be talking about his event, the Arizona Code Day, the one he helps organize. And we'll talk about what specifically goes on there in case you're in the Arizona area. Arizona area. I think that there's a word for that called a state. So yeah, let's get started. I apologize, we're a little flustered here. We got started almost an hour and 15 minutes late. We had some major technical issues. I'm going to spare you all the half-hour Microsoft rant. Just know, I'm going to put a placeholder here for you all, and you can just like mentally fill in, Yeah. Alex here, he was saying that I'm kind of like the Alex Jones of Microsoft rants, and I can't deny that because like my face gets red and I start screaming, and then I start like coming up with conspiracy theories for why Internet Explorer has a particular feature. I thought it was a pretty good analogy. It also made me reevaluate my life. All right, let's go ahead and get Alex in here. We also have Elio on the phone. Elio, my wife and I, we still laugh about how I've known you for over 13 years, and it was just like 3 weeks ago you told me how to say your name right. But
too much training saying it the wrong way. Good luck overcoming that.
Right? No kidding. I'm trying though. You can see I have a concerted effort.
I think about 20% of the time you talk to somebody else, they're always asking you, how do you pronounce his name? So I think you're okay.
Right. All right. So, Alex, let me first thank you very much for coming on the show. It's really awesome that you come on a little show like this and tell us all of your secrets. Sounds really exciting. So let's start off with just what a Code Day is. Okay, or let's actually take a step back. Instead of Code Day, let's just talk about code events in general. What is a code event? I presume it's something where people go and code, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things you can define as a coding event. There's types of things like hackathons. There are things like Code Day, and there are more corporate kind of hackathons. Code Day itself is more focused around getting kids to code, but we're not really a hackathon. A hackathon's more of that something specific is being built or some purpose is happening for those events. Where Code Day is more about kind of giving kids the creative room to kind of do their own stuff and let them do their own event. We don't really tell them what to do or how to do stuff. We give them some guidance, but our philosophy is kind of a little bit like chaos. We let them have that chaotic situation like you'd have in a real business and let them actually build something that they want to build. Where hackathons are a little bit more structured, and they also usually have prizes and stuff like that. Code Day is a little less structured and more about just letting them have that time and opportunity.
Would you consider a Code Day to be more for younger people and hackathons for older people, or do they have crossover as well? I'm saying, can you hear me? Oh, it looks like he got cut out.
I can.
Yeah, he's frozen right now, so...
Sorry.
Oh, there you are. He's back.
Okay, I was going to say, I'll fill in the blanks for now if we lost him.
Alex, can you hear me right now?
Yep.
All right, cool. So the question was whether or not are hackathons more for older coders and Code Days more for younger coders, or is there an overlap between the two?
There definitely is an overlap between the two. I mean, the general philosophy is you spend some time building something or trying to hack something together. it's kind of code day is just kind of a term we use for our team. You could loosely put it into the category of a hackathon, but usually I don't know. Like I always see hackathons more of like there's some purpose to it. Like you'll have a hackathon about building a startup. You'll have a hackathon about like using an API or something like that. Where code day is a little bit more open-ended. Like we don't really enforce any rules. We just want them to have that time to build something.
Cool. What kind of attendance do you have? How big are the events?
So we range. It just depends on the time of year. In our May events, we have usually between 50 to 60 students. But during our February or November events, we can have between 120 to 200 people. We ran one about 2 years ago for 260 attendees,
Wow.
which was a little chaotic to run.
A little chaotic.
Yeah.
260 kids running around, getting to do whatever they want to without a central goal.
Yeah. Since then, we've really kind of narrowed it down and said, for our events, we're going to try to stick to about 100 to 120 as a maximum. In the Phoenix area, we have a very good presence, so we could definitely go above that, but we try not to push it because logistically, it's just kind of impossible to run those things.
How often are they run?
So we run one every 3 months. We have a bit of a lull in the summer. So we'll go off kind of on a break for 3 months and then come back to organize for our November event.
Cool. So if I am brand new to a code day, what would I want to show up with if I was going to do this? And should I feel at all embarrassed at being an old dude going to an event with mostly kids there?
Probably. I mean, especially with your rant against Microsoft. We generally only allow like people from ages 9 to 18, although we've had some people who are in their 20s come. It's really focused around that age, and a lot of our logistics and our support and a lot of our rules are more about babysitting. You know what I mean? Like you're better off at probably a hackathon at those points.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's say I have a kid and I raise it for 7 years, and now I'm coming to your code day, right? What would my kid want to bring?
So generally we ask them to bring a laptop or their desktop computer. And that's about it. We feed them, we give them 3 meals. If they want to sleep, they should bring a sleeping bag. But after you have 7 Mountain Dews in you, you generally do not sleep. So
especially when you're like 3 foot tall, right?
Yeah. So we generally don't have a lot of people sleeping, but we do have like sleeping rooms and stuff like that. But a computer, we have lenders for our team to hand out also, but they're generally not as good.
So if somebody doesn't have a computer, or rather maybe they only have a family computer and the family's not willing for them to drag their box out and stuff like that, they're not going to get excluded. You have some lender for them or something for them to participate with.
Correct. Yeah. We have.
Yeah.
I'll go for it.
Oh, I was going to say, let me jump in real quick. I'm actually getting told I need to join the event I'm supposed to be going to. Look, you're there. Oh, it's echoing through someone's computer. So yeah, we've had events. We go out of our way trying to have a good turnout with Title I kids, and yeah. Go ahead.
Elio's actually at an event right now, and he let us know before the show that he might be interrupted and he might have to leave. So that's what's I think's going on.
Yeah, there's doing some kind of weird feedback thing, and I got to run anyway. So I'll let Alex take it. Thank you again for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And if I can, depending on how long this event runs, I'll jump back on later in the broadcast.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right. See you later, Elio.
See ya.
All right. Take care, guys. Thanks.
As far as lenders go, we do have a lot of lender laptops we give out. They're not the greatest laptops in the world. We've gotten them donated throughout the years to our organization in Phoenix. I think they have like Ubuntu on them for the students to use, which is sometimes a learning curve because most students are, it was very interesting. My first time going there, I looked around the room and we talk a lot in the dev community about how we love Macs and stuff, but we all came from Windows when we were younger, learning how to program. So it's definitely, that's the operating system of choice in those kinds of events. So that's kind of where we have our most of our knowledge at.
Okay. And so, but I mean, you do have I would just imagine that if the learning curve is just that you have to open up a text editor, then you can sort of sit with that person and take over for that. And if somebody comes and they don't have a computer, they're still going to have a good time. That's what I'm gathering, right?
Correct. Yeah. And the thing is, like, there's a lot of, like, we in a group of like 80, at least 60% of them have never programmed before. And I'd say about 10 to 15% might actually just be artists. And they're there just to learn how to like incorporate their artwork into actual games or any other kind of designs. So if they don't have a computer, we'll lend them one. But a lot of time they end up actually doing drawings and stuff like that to work on the games or doing the. I remember I taught one kid one time how to use Excel to do calculations for their game engine so that they could figure out how to actually write weapon stats and attack stats and stuff without having to program it over and over again. So there's lots of different opportunities outside of just programming. There's, if you think about a game, you have to have a lot of different aspects, or even an app, you need a lot of stuff. So there's lots of opportunities for people to do things other than programming if they don't have a computer, but there'll always be a computer available for them.
And since it's a younger audience, do you find them gravitating a lot towards game dev?
Yeah. Majority, I'd say last time we had about 25 projects, and I'd say 20 of those 25 were games. And that's just kind of, I think kids, that's what they do. They play games and they want to make a game. That's how I got into programming, is I wanted to make a game. And I think it's cool. I think it's a great opportunity for them to jump into it. We've tried to encourage them a little bit more to do apps or kind of business ideas. But the suggestion is not the easiest thing to do all the time. So. Right.
And so, what kind of technologies do you start them out on? Do you have a standard platform that you usually get them onto, like Java or something like that, or do you sort of match them up?
No, so actually we're very hands off in that sense. We don't give them a ton of direction on what platform to use or any tools to use. If they come to us and ask us, definitely we'll recommend Scratch or Snap as a very first starter tool to kind of start learning. But what we found is that a lot of the kids come in with kind of a preconceived idea of what they want to do, or kind of somebody in the group has an idea of what they want to do. So they'll pull up, usually we have them pull up something like GameMaker or Unity. Kind of they're abstracted from the programming realm, but it still allows them to build something quickly. Right. We do have a lot of kids who come in knowing JavaScript, some knowing Python, but outside of that, that's kind of the two languages that people usually know coming into the event. So, but because there's such a wide range, we generally don't push any which way. We let them kind of have their choice and let them be creative with it.
So it's kind of almost a Montessori sort of an approach where they show you what they're interested in, and you just try to equip them with everything they need in order to be successful at that.
Correct. Yes. And part of that is just making sure we have mentors on hand that can solve those problems. And that's one of the biggest difficulties of running an event like this, is that a lot of the people who are interested in helping coding education, we didn't go into the game industry. We went into the practical industry, the business industry side of it. And we don't really know the tools in the gaming industry. So that's been one of the tricks of, we got to find enough people who can mentor and help out students who want to build games, but not discourage them because we have no lack of knowledge, no understanding of those programs.
Is that a challenge to find those kinds of teachers?
Yeah, for sure. It's a huge, if you're running an event like this for kids, finding people who know Unity or finding people who know GameMaker is a huge challenge, especially once they get above 20 or 25, because it's just something that you drop off as you start working in, a corporate environment. It's just not a tool you use. So it's hard. It's definitely hard to find. We have a couple people who are really good at them, but it's one of those things where you have to kind of take the initiative and learn it yourself. Like I've been learning Unity and GameMaker just so I can mentor for the most part.
So you kind of, even though you're a software developer, in this sense, you're really taking the approach as a teacher, and you're trying to be a good teacher first and learn whatever it is that the kids are going to be interested in. And if it turns out they like RPG Maker or something like that, you're going to go dive deep into that and learn that for them.
Yeah, and a lot of it's if you spend a couple of days working with Unity, you'll get the gist of like how it works and how you can get the main stuff going. And then if they get really deep into it, which they will, because it's just surprising how far a 15 or 16-year-old can get into a program in one night. Then you have one or two people on the team who can jump into the deep problems. But for the starters, or how do I get a sound to play when someone jumps? That kind of stuff is easy to learn, and Udemy makes it pretty easy to get that down. So it helps.
Do you think that Maria Montessori said that learning is a self-organizing system? And do you think that that's exemplified when you see a kid trying to learn something like Unity?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we give like a couple like tutorials and stuff like that they can go to, but not everyone goes to them. And when you just sit someone down and say, hey, you got 24 hours and you've got the people here from the industry to help you out, they self-organize, they self-build their teams. We don't even have to tell them a lot about project management or organization. They just do it. Like they'll get 5 or 6 people together and they start working together. And I think it's awesome because I know for me, from an education perspective, that's the kind of environment I want to learn in. And so it's just great to be able to give that back and say, we're going to give you, at least for 24 hours, an unstructured environment for you to learn something cool. And I know that's not very common in like the educational realm, and especially in Arizona.
Is there a continuity between the events? Like, is there a community of people who keep coming back and they all know each other?
Yeah, there's a lot of students that we've had who, the students especially, start to know each other. We have some people who, this is our 10th one in Phoenix, and they've been to every single event. In fact, a lot of the students have started so long ago that they're now organizing with us because they've been here so long. So there's a huge continuity in the attendees. Our organizing team's pretty tightly knit, so every single time we know each other, we know who's coming. And we hang out after our events. So it's created a nice community that we can use to build these events a little bit quicker and also a little bit more streamlined.
That's really cool. I recently read something that said that it was debunked that it's more efficient to do a different learning style catered to each person. I read something about this. Do you agree with that? Do you think that each person needs to learn in their own way, or that there's sort of a mold? That's probably the worst word I could possibly use for a kid. But what I mean is there more of a structure where you found that it's more effective?
That's a good question. Like well, let me ask you, where did you find that quote at? Like, who said that? Like, in what context was that?
So it's actually, I have to sadly admit that it was because my wife had told me, that's been debunked. And then I went online and I looked it up, and it was like one of the first, Google things that I had found. In fact, I'm not really even wanting to comment on that. I was really wanting to more get your personal experience with it, your anecdotal experience. Do you see it as advantageous to learn the students' learning style and to cater to it, or to get them to learn in a certain way?
I don't personally feel like I have to like learn that individual student's learning style. One of the things is that we do offer, we offer a couple opportunities for people to get kind of more classroom instruction. We have student mentors on hand to help them if they want to have a one-on-one personal kind of instruction. But as far as, does someone learn more visually, or does someone learn more listening, all that kind of stuff like that, like, it just doesn't feel like it's necessary. If you have a special needs student in the event, it becomes a little bit more difficult until you do have to understand how they learn and how they want to be talked to. I remember one anecdote of it I can give you is we had a student who was deaf, but he didn't tell us he was deaf. And so sometimes I gotta tell you honestly, like, teenagers, they can be assholes. And if you go up and talk to them, they just don't want to talk back to you. And so our entire staff had gone up and tried to ask this student, what's the problem? Is everything okay? And he never responded back to us. So we thought, okay, he's just being a teenager. It's fine. Until he told one of our mentors he wanted to go home because he wasn't having a good time. And he wrote that on paper. And so it's one of those things where, if we had known that beforehand, we could have.
It looks like you're lagging out just a little bit. We're going to wait for you to come back.
It's up to them to be kind of to learn, I think, to figure out how they best learn and then to apply that themselves instead of having to rely on somebody else to do that.
That's a very insightful comment, I think. You can't really expect somebody else out there to do a deep study on you and learn everything about you and truly understand how you learn. That's something that we all really have to take on ourselves, because even after we're out of school, our continued education depends upon how well we can teach ourselves, or how much money we have to throw at trainers, right?
Yeah. And I think that's important, because even when you look at, college and higher education, the more important value that you're going to learn is not necessarily, you're not going to come out of college learning JavaScript or, how to do SQL or stuff like that. You're going to learn organizational skills and how to keep yourself on task. And I think that's one of the more important things to teach to people. We can teach them code all day long, but if they can't organize something, or if they can't keep on task, that's horrible. That's not a great hire. That's not a great person to work with.
Right. At the end, how long are the events?
So they're 24 hours straight. We go from noon to noon, Saturday to Sunday.
Okay. And if somebody comes in there and do they have to be there the whole 24 hours? Can they come in at any time?
They can come in any time, but I'd say 99% of people are there for the whole 24.
Oh, okay. And at the end of these 24 hours, generally, what do the kids get to go home with?
So they get to go home with their projects. They get to go home with hopefully some more friends that they've met at the event, because a lot of people come solo or just with one other person. There's some prizes we give out, like kind of just giveaways, like Google Cardboards or like headphones and stuff like that. We have prizes that our judges give out, but we don't give anything major. It's just kind of they're little 3D printed figurines that we give out to the best teams and the best apps and games and stuff like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So we try hard not to give out like monetary prizes, or like anything that's physical. We want it to be more intrinsic on why you're here.
How often are you surprised by what they build?
I think every single time.
Every time.
I think that every time. Like I've been doing this now for about 2 years, and to see what a 9-year-old or a group of 9-year-olds can do in 24 hours is, I know for me, kind of awe-inspiring. But when I have new mentors come in, they're just kind of, they're a little pissed off with themselves, because they think that they should be in that position. They're like, look, I've got all this knowledge, all this talent, why can't I do the same thing? And I think we kind of lose that aspect of play as we grow up, I guess.
Can you give us any sort of examples that come off the top of your head for things that a 9-year-old made you just go, wow, like, wow, I can't believe that you're building this?
Yeah, so these 3 9-year-olds, they told me they weren't going to stay up all night long, but the 8 or 9 Mountain Dews on their desk said differently. And they spent the whole night putting together a top-down shooter game with about 7 different levels and 3 different characters, and I think 3 different power-ups.
In 24 hours.
Yeah, in 24 hours.
Wow. They could raise money for a charity on Twitch doing that,
Yeah, I know, right? That's a great idea. They should be doing that. So like that kind of stuff. I've seen some people take I've given some people very little instruction on like how to use Ajax calls and do some JavaScript events, and they've built it into entire apps that they've been able to release at the end of the time, or at least modify a little bit and then release after. So little things like that, like League of Legends. There was one for like a League of Legends like aggregator, or to be able to look up your skills. Or I don't play League of Legends, so
right. But it's like it assists you in looking up stats and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's really
call and stuff.
So they're pretty intimately involved in the data. So they understand at least in video games, the data's not as important, right, as saying what position you want the character to be in and stuff. But when you're talking about an application that's going to be looking up the stats of multiple players and things like that, we're talking about databases. We're talking about pulling rows and being able to display those things. So there is an aspect, or there is at least a segment of these kids that are into app development and like maybe even web development, not just programming, or sorry, not just game dev. Even though game dev, like you said, is the most popular.
Yeah, we have a handful every time that go into more app focused stuff or web focused stuff. And a lot of it is, there's a lot of aspirational stuff. We have a lot of people who really want to build, that really cool app to help their community out, or that cool app that, they thought of. I remember one time we had a student who built an app to control your house's air conditioning. Now, it didn't get very far, but it was still a very good idea. And they were still coming up with a lot of concepts, and they had to work through all the business problems of, how do we actually connect air conditioners and who is going to let us use this kind of stuff. So those are the kinds of things that we definitely encourage, just because we just don't have enough of them. And we also have so much mentor brain power in those realms that we love to kind of help them out. And we hope that we get more of those on as we continue to go down.
How much do you tell them about the realities of business without crushing their souls?
Very little. I think one of the best things about hackathon is you see just how difficult it is to be in a business and to build something. One of the great lessons I think you learn is that you can't build everything and release everything at the same time. You really have to sit down and say, what is my MVP? What is the main focus of my customers? And I think when you start getting into an app, you start listening to people write down 1,000 ideas, or even a game. They write down 1,000 ideas. They want 100 levels. They want 50,000 characters. They want all these cool things like that. And then when the reality comes down to it, you get 2 or 3 levels and maybe 1 character. And I think that's the area where people get that realism of like, wow, this isn't necessarily easy. It's time consuming. It can be tedious at times. And that's probably why my favorite video game only has 12 hours gameplay. You know what I mean? Like that helps, I think, shape some people's minds on that kind of stuff.
Do they get frustrated sometimes and want to give up? And do you have to give them pep talks and things like that?
I haven't had a situation where people like explicitly give up. I think I've had times like we don't really disencourage gaming at our thing. Like if you're working for 24 hours straight, you should be taking breaks every 25, 30 minutes anyway. So they'll play games. And if we see someone gaming for exorbitant amount of time, we do go up to them and ask them like, hey, how's your project going? We do see some people who just say like, we just can't do it. And we have to we have to talk them a little bit. But a lot of that comes down to kind of a Socratic method of like, okay, let's talk about why you're not doing this right, or let's talk about what the problem was here. And that generally gets them back on track and allows them to get back to that thought process that maybe they just don't have the experience to solve yet.
Is there a ticket price for the kids?
Yeah, so we charge $10 a student.
And that's for the full 24 hours?
Yes, that's for the full 24. But I can tell you, usually we have like coupon codes and other stuff like that for most schools that we work with to let their students come free.
And if somebody just is low income or something, could they contact you and maybe you could hook them up?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, do you have any, did any of their projects did they continue them after they were there at the code day, and did they, go on to make it into anything?
That's a good question. I don't really track them after.
You don't stalk kids on the internet?
No.
Oh, that's a good thing.
So I think the League of Legends one actually got published, but I didn't really follow it through. I have talked to the students like as they come back, event through event, and I do know some of them have gotten jobs in the industry. I've actually hired one person for my team where I work to work on my team as an engineer, and he kind of got his chops at Code Days. So it's a great place to, one of the things we tell people is that, especially sponsors, is that this is not just a place for kids to code. This is a place for you to find the talent for your team in the future. And as you watch somebody develop over 3 years, you're going to get a very good understanding of how that person works, what they're good at and what they're not good at. And, honestly, that's, there couldn't be anything better from an employer perspective.
Sorry, I have a very loud motorcycle going by. I'm in Colorado right now, and it's very, very hot. And so I have the window open, and we're going to get some of those. So I got a little off track here because of the motorcycle. So you're not sure exactly where their projects went afterwards, but some of them went on to have careers in the industry. So this sounds like a really cool place for somebody who is, maybe they're, because I imagine I've met a lot of kids and they've said, I want to make a video game. Right. But like you said, when they first try it and they actually get into it, sometimes they find out, hey, this is a lot of work. And maybe some of them find out this isn't the kind of work I want to be doing. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's a really great place for somebody who's considering a career it sounds like from what's the youngest age you've ever had?
I mean, the youngest that I know
that actually participated, I suppose.
Probably like not 8 or 9 years old.
Okay, so it's like from 8 or 9, and you said all the way up to 20 for the upper range, right? So for anybody in that range that's considering a career in either game dev or app development or something like that, they can go there and for $10 try it out and really see if it's for them. And to me, I mean that'd be a really cheap mistake to make, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that low barrier to entry is what makes it awesome. One of the reasons why I'm actually involved in this event is when I was in college, or sorry, in high school, these just didn't exist in the Valley. And now in the Valley we have a lot of these different events. I think there's probably 6 to 7 of these in a year. We do 3 of them. There's at least 3 other ones that run from other organizations. But it just kind of, when I was younger, I wish I would have that experience to be able to sit down with someone who's in the industry and talk to them and to actually work through a project with them and see how I was doing. It probably would have got me on a much higher level than I am now as far as a developer goes, and probably would have focused me throughout college, so I would not have focused on the wrong things.
Elio said there's a lot of talk between the students and the experts. Like they pick the experts' heads a lot. What kind of things do they like to ask you about?
I mean, I get asked a lot, like what's my day-to-day work look like? What does it actually mean to be a developer? What kind of projects do I work on? I've gotten asked a lot about like what does a real program look like at the back end? And sometimes I just have to pull up GitHub and show them some of the stuff I work on at work, and just show them like what you're working on here times 10,000 or something like that. Those are the kinds of questions I hear a lot. The game stuff, I don't really fall into that category. So a lot of the people who work on games answer a lot of those questions on like what's it like to be in the game industry, what's it like to build a game, what's it like to be on those kinds of things. I get asked a lot, what should I do for college? Which is, I think Eli and I had a good conversation last night about that as far as, is college necessary as a developer? And that's kind of a whole tangent we could go off of.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been on that tangent several times on the show. I think our conclusion is that if the industry requires you to have a degree, then you're going to have to get a degree. And otherwise, it's up to you. So... how did you get your start? Let's talk about you for just a small bit, and I want to loop back and talk a little bit more about what goes into throwing these events. But how did you get your start in software development, and what made you want to actually teach people?
Yeah, so honestly, I've been programming since I was about 12 years old. So I've got, oh my gosh, almost 19 years of experience now, just playing around. I started when I was really young, just doing basic websites and things like that. And then throughout my high school career, I used it just to build games in PHP and MySQL. And I learned a lot, like how to do little things like that. I used the programming tools just to like automate things. Like I'd play these online games called it was called, I think, Planetarium and Starsphere. And they had a lot of opportunities to kind of figure out how to beat the other players by automating some of the stats and some of the lookups and stuff like that. Throughout college, I really said I didn't want to be a programmer anymore. I'm kind of sick of it. I went to marketing, kind of got my marketing background in my college career, worked poor retail jobs, and then got an offer somewhere. At the place I'm working now, I've been working there for about 7 years. I went into a team, and I was doing like quoting, health insurance quoting or something like that. And they had a software product that was completely underutilized, and they do payroll, time and attendance, and HR stuff. And they had like 2 people doing things online, and everyone else faxing in payroll, which is just an absolute nightmare. And so during the nights, I would work on the platform, and the owner of the company kind of said, well, why they had this whole other team that was working.
Oh, Alex, looks like you cut out one more time, so we're going to wait a moment. I do apologize. I wish if this thing did a freeze frame, it did it at a more flattering time, but we don't get to choose which frame it freezes us on.
Sorry, I'm back now.
Okay, there we go.
So for me, my professional career kind of fell into my lap. I had the opportunities to build a platform from scratch and to rebuild some systems in a space that was kind of interesting, which is payroll and time attendance. And I've been working in that industry for about 7 years now, just building up through JavaScript and PHP and SQL and some other tools on how to build stuff. How I got involved in this kind of stuff actually comes from that, and it comes from recruiting. As a project lead, I run a team of 8 people, and to hire people who are a good fit for your company is a little bit difficult, especially as a smaller business. So my goal is always to look for the next great talent to kind of come onto my team or to intern on my team so I can find those people. And part of my strategy as a team lead is to go to these kinds of events, go to not only to code days but to other kinds of things, and talk to people and see how people develop in the real world, and then give them an opportunity to work as they develop. And I think it allows me to find the best talent for my team and also find people who I just work well with. If I have somebody, if you have somebody you've been mentoring for 3 years and now they're out of high school and they're ready for a job, there's no better opportunity for a team member at that point. I mean, you've nurtured them from literally like a larvae stage up into a programmer, and that person, it works a lot better than someone you just kind of find off the street.
No, absolutely. I was also a team lead for 15 years, and what I always considered my primary job as a team lead to be was to unblock my developers from anything that is preventing them from being successful. And it sounds to me like you at a code day, you're getting to practice this with new people all the time, and with changing people all the time, new kinds of people all the time. It seems to me like, I should have been doing something like that to become a better team lead. It sounds very complementary to your career.
Yeah. And that's a perfect example too, because like the amount of problem solving you have to do on your feet at one of these events is high. Like setting up a little network between 5 students so that they can have their Unity project shared between them, making sure that, sometimes you just have to deal with kids' behavioral issues, but you've got to unblock that, because if a kid's behaving bad, that's going to influence how other people can work throughout the night. So there's all these things like, it does complement my day job, where I have to, okay, why isn't this project done? Well, because this person won't talk to me. Okay, I've got to get these people connected. You know what I mean? There's an endless amount of times you have to problem solve, and you just have to think on your feet, and you have to make those decisions so that people can continue to work on the projects.
Do you find that the kids or the professionals you work with to be more difficult?
I don't necessarily.
It was
think
sort of a joke. You don't have to actually answer it if you don't want to.
Say, actually, no, I would say that both of them are quite pleasant. I mean, you will have stubborn students if you run one of these events, but really you have to be patient. And I remember, I'll give you a good example, just kind of go off that. We had this one student, and he still comes to code day, and he's very like, oh, I know everything. I don't need to be taught anything at all. Like, I'm the best CSS person in the entire place. And so one of my team members, who's actually a really amazing CSS guy, was like, kind of like put off and like, well, like, this guy's been developing for 12 years and doing CSS his entire life, and he lives and breathes it, which is uncommon because people hate CSS. And so this kid's like trying to put him down. And so like I went up to him and just started to suggest other options and suggest other ideas. And that, that was a difficult situation, but I wanted to diffuse it so he would be open. And because of that, that student, who's now been at multiple different events, has actually come up to me over and over again and asked for my help and my feedback. And I think you just have to use that as a learning lesson. Like, you have to communicate, and you have to know how to break through walls. And that's, totally complementary to being a project manager or a project lead on any team.
Are any of your teachers remote, or is everybody on site?
Everybody's on site. We've tried in the past to do um, remote mentors and stuff, but it hasn't really worked out as we wanted to.
What were the main challenges in that, in case somebody else wanted to maybe try that out? What would you warn them against?
The main challenge on that was mostly visibility. To maintain off-site people with like 100 students, you're going to need to have some way to make that person visible to people, and you have to make some way to say, oh, you got a problem, hit up this join me or hit up this Zoom meeting where this guy's waiting at his computer at home, and talk to them. And the logistics of it kind of don't work as much as, just kind of going to somebody, pulling them aside, and having them walk over. And it comes down more to convenience, I guess.
Gotcha. So one of our audience members asked a great question. They said, "Has anybody done any hardware programming, or is it just software at Code Camp or Code Day?"
Yeah, good question. So far, we've only had mostly software. We do bring in robotics for the students to play with, but they don't generally make many projects off of robotics. What we'll do is we'll have like a robot out, and then for the younger students who are like less than 14 or 15, we'll definitely give them some time on the robotics so they can play with it. One of the other things we've done, and one of the things we're doing on our next event in May, is we actually have some VR specialists coming in so that the students can play with the VR technology and learn how to build stuff with it. And so what it comes down to is that they really don't know a lot about it. But if you bring mentors in who know stuff, like if you have an IoT expert or someone who can bring in some, Intel boards or Arduinos, and you just give them the opportunity to play with it, they will play with it.
That's
but
awesome.
You just have to have the logistics to do that kind of stuff.
That's really great. Just want to take one moment to give a shout out to Hardly Difficult. He gave us a host from his show. So we have 64 new viewers who just came in. So I figured we'll just give them a quick recap about what we're talking about and what this is all about. This is Alex here, and he's a Code Day organizer in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And he organizes these events where kids can come and learn how to code. And we're picking his brain right now to see what are the challenges in that, what are the expectations for that, and and just trying to get some more details on what goes into all of that. So teachers are not remote, so that means they all have to be on site. So if somebody wanted to become a teacher and they're working with children, are there certain sorts of licensing that you have to go through and checks in order to be legal to do that, or how does that work? Because I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, so the way we do it is if you want to be a mentor on our team, we're not going to stop you. If, for example, like we've never had a situation where a mentor was a bad influence. Mm-hmm. There are situations where you have to like kind of make sure mentors know what they're doing. There are people who definitely want to sit there and just kind of lecture the students. So we try to have at least a little bit of a training beforehand to tell them like, hey, here's what you should say. Here's how you should handle like students. Here's how you should kind of, work with them instead of talking to them. Right. So from our mentor's perspective, there's no licensing or anything that they need. It's just more of, come share your knowledge and be patient. And I think if you're running your own event, that's the most important thing for a mentor. If you want to have somebody, it's just patience. Like if someone's impatient or the students aren't following their direction, you probably need to adjust your own attitude and your own kind of process and kind of talk to them again. One of the studies I've read is that people who are that age don't have a lot of empathy. Their brains just are not developed for it yet, and so you just have to know that. Like, look, they might be kind of dicks to you, but it happens. Like, you just got to deal with it a little bit and kind of readjust yourself.
Gotcha. So you've talked a little bit before the show about how you have an interest in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and things like that. Does that ever come up in Code Day, or is that still just a pretty fringe sort of knowledge?
It's more fringe knowledge, I think, right now. As far as Code Day goes, I think a lot of the tools and stuff are not as easy for students to pick up and run with quite yet. I know I've looked at a bunch of them, but they're just not they're not as easy as like Game Maker or Snap just to dig in and start doing stuff. Although I've seen a lot of APIs and different tools for like chatbots. I got to say, one thing we did do once though was we did have an Amazon Alexa or Echo there, and that allowed people to kind of dig into the API and start playing around with that, and that was very interesting. But is that really AI or machine learning? Not really. You know what I mean? It's kind of faux
Right.
learning.
Well, it's like you were saying in the beginning, it's mostly about them telling you what they want to do, and they choose their own stack. And if they're not familiar with basic programming at this point, then machine learning is just completely foreign. So, but in the future, if there was sort of a machine learning snap, if there per se, then and they asked for it, this would become part of the program.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, one of the things that we've found is that, I mean, it's just like building an agile project. You have to look and see what students want to learn and what they want to know about. For example, for a long time, we didn't have like a cybersecurity pathway. But for the last 3 events, we've actually had cybersecurity experts on hand, and we've run capture the flags for our attendees, and allowed them just to kind of go crazy on that kind of stuff. So we've listened to their feedback and kind of brought in brought in the experts and kind of brought in different programs for them so they could understand a little bit more about things like they never knew it before.
And do you talk to them ever about things like SQL injection and certain kinds of bad patterns for cybersecurity?
We have mentors who will do different presentations. For example, last time we had one of our mentors actually do an entire I think it was an hour and a half thing on like ethics of hacking. So he was actually a lawyer, and he was sitting down and telling the students like, okay, this is where it's okay, this is where it's not okay. And that definitely gave them a lot of like feedback on, what can you do legally and what can't you do legally. And the interesting thing is that was supposed to be 20 minutes, but it lasted an hour and a half of all the students' questions. And it was all just kind of variations on different, can I break into my school? But those are the kinds of things that allow the attendees to get better insight on what they can do in the world, and also just ideas on what they could try.
And how many events have you done so far with Code Day?
As far as head organizer, I've run 4 of them. As far as like working with it, I think it's been about 6 or 7 that I've worked with them on them.
Gotcha. And so in these 6 or 7, do you find that the production is getting a little easier to put on?
Yeah, for sure. The first couple that you run will always be just almost an absolute nightmare. The logistics of it is pretty heavy. You always have to sit down and really re-examine after every event and figure out what went right, what went wrong. And it really comes down to like the biggest thing that it always comes down to is venue. You have to have a good venue and a venue that's willing to work with you. And especially with Code Day, it's a little bit different because we do 24 hours with students and with younger kids. And so a lot of venues are kind of like a little hesitant of that. You have to abide by some of the weird kind of rules at their venues because of the student thing. But it does become easier once you get more networked in the community, and a little bit easier, especially with logistics and food and stuff like that.
Right. Let's start with the very first event. So because I mean, I don't know anybody else in our audience who's doing quite what you're doing, but maybe they want to. And so if they wanted to, what would you suggest? I mean, what goes into your first event? What are the actual steps involved with setting up an event? Or is that, as long as that's not too big of a can to ask you to open?
No, not at all. So if you're going to start an event, well, first off, we actually work we work kind of like under an umbrella organization called Student R&D, and they're out of Seattle. They run about 23 of these events every 3 months. One of the reasons why it's great to work with a company like that, or not a company, they're a nonprofit, to work with a nonprofit like that is because one of the biggest difficulties you'll have is liability, and all the insurance needs that you need to have for an event like this. There's not going to be a venue that's going to let you do an event like this without having some level of liability insurance or insurance, stuff like that. So an organization like Student R&D, which is a 503B, I think it is, has all that liability for you and allows you to run the events under their name so that you don't have to go to somebody and actually pull that liability. So that part is kind of your first, how am I going to make sure that if something bad happens, it's covered. The second part is just the venue. Venues are just like probably one of the tougher things to find. And the main reason is that you have to find an organization that really wants to work with you. I think I lost you.
Yeah, I think you're going. There you are. You're back.
You have to really find venues that really want to work with you, and really are going to be patient with you, especially as your first couple times of running one of these things. You need to find someone who's got a really good internet, because I can't even tell you how many times we've run one of these events and we've destroyed the internet. I mean, we're talking
Oh.
professional event venues or professional organizations. And when you get 120 kids on there downloading all their apps, and some of them are downloading Steam stuff, the network just dies.
How do you go about talking to the venues about that? What kind of questions specifically do you ask to see if they're savvy and they know what they're talking about?
So from our side, we actually have a couple people on our team who are a little bit more savvy as far as the networking side, who go out to the event prior and actually test it.
Oh.
It's actually kind of nice for the event venue because we do give them kind of feedback of like, hey, here's how your network's set up. Here's how you can set it up a little bit better. So for small business, it's kind of beneficial. For bigger companies, it's they really can't do anything about it. So we do give them that feedback. If the network's kind of bad, what we try to do is have our own server, and we generally what we'll do is we'll print out like a document for the students and say, hey, if you want to download any of these apps, like let's say Unity, because Unity is almost a gig to download. If you want to download Unity, don't go to unity.com, go to this IP address and download it from our local server. And so that way we can kind of free up a little bit of the outbound traffic.
Gotcha.
And the other thing is if you're going to run a cybersecurity thing, you definitely need to talk to them about what you're going to be doing. I know we had one venue who was a little bit panicked when we were doing something like a billing request outbound to attack a site, and they just didn't know we were going to do that. So you just need to make sure that they understand that if you're doing cybersecurity stuff, that you will be doing outbound attacks, and that hopefully if you're doing it right, you have the right to do that. You're not just hitting like Google or Facebook or something stupid.
Right. Don't want to be violating any laws.
No, not at all.
So after you get the venue and you have your insurance, you said something about sponsors earlier, and how do sponsors fit in, and do they actively advertise to the kids in exchange?
Yeah, so sponsors that's a huge part. Like some venues will be free. You might be able to find a venue who charges you nothing, but generally, even though that they're getting a great advertising, they will charge you something. And generally, what they charge you is the labor. So at the last two venues, we've not had any like event fees to like use their spaces, but if they need to bring in like networking people or like porters to clean up trash, they'll charge you for that labor, and that's just cost of doing business in one of these events.
Sure.
As far as finding sponsors, we've got about 7 sponsors for this next event, and on average, an event for about 100 students is going to run in food about $1,000. You're looking at about $10 a student if you do it right. If you're doing it a little bit kind of more laissez-faire, you're going to look at about $20 per student. So you need to make sure you have enough money to cover that every single time. So sponsors are huge, and my view on sponsors is that you want to so I mentioned earlier, kind of more of a marketing background, software and marketing, and you really want to talk to them about how they can market their product in a unique way to the students. And one of the things we do is we try to, like, every sponsor we have that conversation with them and say, okay, you've got a product, you've got a service. How can we make sure that actually gets marketed to students in a way that's just not a name on a banner? Sometimes that's, hey, come talk to them during our opening talks. Sometimes that's, hey, talk to them during the closing or come as a judge. And sometimes that's, we had one group who actually had rubber duckies that they had to hand out. And the marketing team there really didn't know what the rubber duckies were for. But I recognized them and said, hey, that's like rubber ducky, debugging.
Yeah.
And we could have a whole talk on that. And so we actually handed those rubber duckies out to everybody and explained what the rubber ducky was for. And actually what happened was a bunch of students actually made games about the rubber ducky.
Wow.
So from a marketing perspective, you've just ingrained your company into these, into their minds, and allowed yourself to market to them, not in just like a passive way, but in an active way. And I think from a sponsor perspective, that's hugely important, to actually have it's not just put your name on the banner and kind of walk away with, leave me $1,000, walk away with a banner name or something like that. I want you to be actively involved as a sponsor and get something from it. If it's, giving your name out or giving your cards out, or if it's to be able to recruit later on from that pool of students.
Without naming your actual sponsors, what type of sponsors usually sponsor these kinds of events?
Yeah, I don't mind naming. In the Valley, State Farm is our biggest sponsor. They've given us a very generous grant. And I know that they're very into coding education, so they're a good organization to talk to.
Oh, so they have they have a part of their company culture is doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
what's interesting to me about State Farm is that if you can get connected to, like, they don't have a lot of development places. They've got like 3 or 4 around the U.S. But what I found out is that, like, a lot of the developers there love the mentor, but also they get flex time. So if a State Farm person comes and volunteers for 24 hours, that's equal to 24 hours of regular time during the rest of the week, which they can
Right.
take off. So it's a really great opportunity for them to kind of to volunteer, but also to get paid for it. So it's a great organization that helps them out. And then
And
we have a
also,
lot of, like,
it also shows off how flex time really does go out and pay off in these ways that helps the community and the individual. Because the individual is doing what they want to do with their flex time. For some of you out there might not know what we're talking about when we say flex time. Certain companies will allow their employees to have a certain amount of time to work on whatever they want. They can work on a personal project, then go work on something else, whatever it is. And in this case, they're applying themselves to you.
yeah. So they just ask for the time off, or the flex time for 24 hours for code day, and then that kind of gets put into their system, and so they that flexes them for other time.
You sort of looked you sort of looked off when I said flex time, and I maybe I got the wrong definition of flex time. And did I get it a little bit
No,
a little bit
I think
off?
you're right.
Oh, okay.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
I was like, okay, I feel very wrong right now. So after you have your sponsors there, and some of the sponsors will hand out things like rubber ducks. How about State Farm? Do they give anything to the students? Do you have to do a presentation on State Farm to the kids? How does that work? What's their return?
So for State Farm, we don't have to do anything really. Like, they have a lot of their volunteers and mentors and stuff on our team, so they're actually helping actively work the event. What like my general philosophy is that if someone's giving money and wants to help sponsor, then let them kind of do not what they want to do, but help them get to the message they want to get across. And for State Farm, what's really important that I found is that they do like a talk to the students beforehand and just tell them, like, look, like, yeah, us as an insurance company, but we have 6,000 developers, and like how many
Right.
developers how many people we need to hire, and it's just a good way to connect. I mean, in the Valley, when you drive down near their office building, there's this big billboard that says, "Do you have class?" Because there's so many Java developers they have to hire in Phoenix. So it's a huge opportunity for them to recruit and to find developers. And I think for any size company, that's huge. Like, to be able to have that opportunity to find people early on who are talented, and to kind of implant the seed that, hey, we do hire you after this is over. That's not only big for companies, but that's big for pretty much everyone in the community. That if you build something like this in the community, you're building an upward mobile kind of like tool for students to jump into and find those awesome, well-paying careers and be prepared for the future.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too when you were mentioning how State Farm goes about that. And they explain to them, hey guys, you might not know, but we have actual development teams. You know us as an insurance team or an insurance company. That's really interesting because I remember the first time that I learned about Walmart Labs, right? And remember they came up with that flare-up chart for profiling JavaScript applications, and I was like, this is some super cutting edge Node.js stuff. This is really cutting edge, and it came from Walmart. And it was the first time I'd considered that there are in-house development teams for just about every large company. And so it's I think that's a very important thing for kids to be exposed to and to learn about, which is, no, it's not just the companies who are, who are tech companies. It's really everybody has a need for this stuff. And if you learn it, then you're not going to have to go to a tech company to get a job. Maybe you do like I'm in marketing too. So like you like marketing, I like marketing. We both like software, right? I would rather be doing software in the marketing world. And I would rather not be doing something like, financial technology and stuff like that. If I had not known, early on that marketing and advertisement has programming involved with it, I might not have, gravitated towards that, and it's important for kids to learn that there's almost no aspect of the commercial world left that doesn't have a need for some kind of custom software.
And not only that, but like there's not going to be a lot of parts of the world that are going to be left in the future. I mean, when we look at one of the things I tell students when I'm like talking to them in classrooms or environments is that you used to be able to fall back on kind of lower skilled jobs or lower skilled work, but like that kind of stuff will go away in the future. If you think about like I'm from Ohio or I was originally from Ohio, and I look at all the truck drivers out in Ohio and all the people who kind of formed companies like that. I mean, look at all those jobs that could be going away with automated vehicles and automated machines.
Yeah.
And so you really have to prepare yourself for the future. And there's really no better way than kind of getting into software development, or at least having a little bit of knowledge of how to build stuff, so that you can be isolated against that, that's a substantial kind of knock in our economy that will eventually hit us.
Is there an element of philosophy that goes into this, where you talk to the kids about, the sort of the philosophy behind artificial intelligence and the coming wave of artificial intelligence, and how what a disruptive technology is and how that could affect their lives someday?
I think you have to at some level. I mean, I've always kind of found it fascinating that when I was in high school, I graduated high school in 2003, that people they might have had BlackBerries, but not everyone had a phone. And now you talk to teachers and students, and one of the biggest problems is phones. And, just from that level, look at the disruption. But like even YouTube, in 2003, YouTube wasn't a thing. You know what I mean? You could just go online and watch a bunch of cat videos as easily as you can now.
You had to go to E-Bombs World.
Yes. And you didn't know what you're going to find there. So
yeah, you didn't know. Nobody go to that site. I have no idea what's on that anymore. So back in my day, it was the history of dance. So
so the disruption is very clear, and the disruption changes so quickly in our economy today, and it's going to continue, that to really kind of isolate yourself, you need to be on the cutting edge on that kind of stuff, especially if you're coming out of high school in this economy. We just don't know what it's going to look like in 4 to 8 years, and it could change rapidly. And there is a level of philosophizing you have to do, just to say, like, look, this is what we see, and this is what we've seen in our time, and don't fool yourself to think it's going to stop. You know what I mean? Like you got to prepare yourself, and you got to think about the future.
Are there other things that you talk about, philosophically about the software? Do you talk about, corporate differences in approach and things like that, between like, say, Apple and Microsoft, or between Facebook and Steam or Valve, things like that?
Not as much. Like the thing I do tell a lot of students is like, I personally develop mostly in a small business realm. So I tell them kind of the benefits to working in a smaller business. The company I work at has no more than 60 employees. So, that flexibility to kind of jump on things, move and pivot, versus if you worked at a bigger company, what that's going to look like and how that's going to be. And I definitely give kind of advice on, based off of your own attitudes, where do you want to be in the future? What you want to work for a conglomerate? Do you want to work for a smaller company? And Phoenix is a little bit different than Silicon Valley and some of those other areas, so it's got a little bit more clear cut on that kind of stuff. So you do, and it comes back to more like when students ask us questions about how work actually works and what do we do every day. You do get into the kind of conversation of, well, this is the difference between different companies and how those work.
What do you say to them when they ask you, what is your day-to-day life like as a programmer? Because I know what it's like, but I think there's a lot of people in the audience who aspire to be a programmer, and they'd like to know the answer to that question. So What would you say if one of these audience members here were to ask you that right now?
I lost you there.
Oh, do you got us? Oh, 1 second, everybody. We're having some sort of a video conferencing issue. Of course.
Okay, there we go.
There we
I heard
go.
your question. I was gonna say it was kind of like that. It was chaos. There could be a level of chaos that you have to deal with. When you work on a smaller team, you have a lot more responsibilities to deal with. I know I've talked to some people at bigger companies, and they say, "Well, I maintain one piece of the software." One of the things that's fun about my industry that I'm in, which is kind of the HR and payroll realm, is that there's just many moving parts, and as a developer, you have to be attuned to all those moving parts. Like this week, because I deal with a lot of the health insurance and medical industry, I had to look and watch the the vote for the in the House this week and really read through what that's going to do. And part of my role as kind of marketing also is to understand how will that impact our customers in the future. So we put together a new benefits enrollment system, and if the pre-existing condition clause goes away, that means we have to build 3 new pieces of software, and we have to comply with these new regulations. And it makes an impact to your life, especially when you deal with government stuff, which is payroll is all government stuff. So
I think it can make a difference even on the private side. Facebook changed their privacy policies several times in the last 5 years, and each time they did it, they redefined what was legal and what was illegal to do with their data. And they finally, with their recent rollout of their latest privacy policy, we can't do anything with the data anymore. You can't even derive data from the data. And so, and it changed it. That actually ended up changing our business model, because it was like, wow, this thing that we used to sell a lot of is now against this terms of service. And that's just a private company. And you're talking about being affected in the healthcare industries and things like that, and HR, stuff like that, by OSHA, requirements, things like that. Those can change and could, like with our business, it can fundamentally change what you do every day. So you have to be aware.
Yeah, you have to be aware. And I think that comes back to what we talked about earlier, as being a team lead. As a developer on one of my teams, you're not necessarily following the house rules and stuff like that. But it is something that the more that you know and the more that you can kind of isolate yourself from it, the quicker that you can go to somebody in the operations team and say, "Hey, I heard that there could be a 30% surcharge on every customer who doesn't have this, and how can we make sure that everyone has this product," or something like that. You know what I mean? There's just lots of opportunity. I mean, there's lots of opportunity from a building the software perspective, but there's also lots of opportunity to just make sure that you don't get thrown something last minute that you didn't realize. Like in Arizona, I'll give you a good example. We just passed a new law that said you have to have a minimum 10 hours of PT, or $10 an hour, and then there's a whole new sick time policy. And by reading through the sick time policy, I was able to understand a little bit more about the rules and how that was going to impact us and what technologies we had to build in order to actually comply with our own state. And that's more of a kind of a project manager role, I guess, and kind of a product owner role. But I think those lines are blurred at smaller companies. You have to be heads up and aware of that kind of stuff.
Right. So we talked a little bit about the sponsorship. We talked about getting the insurance and finding the venue. And let's say we have all 3 of those things, right? And now I need to get people aware that I have an event going on at all. How do you guys go about doing that? How do you advertise?
Yeah, so our main kind of avenues or channels for advertising our stuff is through teachers. We interact with a bunch of teachers. We know a bunch of teachers in the community, and we either try to go out and talk to the students or send them coupon codes, make sure that they're aware. And really the teachers and also teachers and principals and kind of school administrators are our biggest advocates in the Valley. They're the ones who are really kind of saying wow, this is a free event for my students to go to and kind of, be better. And I'm going to make sure that they go. And a lot of times what happens is you get schools who will load up a school bus and just come into your events. And so You'll have 30, 40 students from one school. have all the permission slips and stuff for for a school event, and they'll come and be there for the whole time. And so you get the teachers coming because they've got to supervise the field trip and all that fun stuff. And so it gives you a good opportunity to interact with them and to talk to them and kind of, get the feedback you desperately need to make sure that you're building the event correctly in the future. But yeah, reaching out and getting involved in schools is huge. The more that you can get involved in a school and help out with their events, the more that they're going to help you out in your events. Is kind of a kind of a reciprocal thing. And also just from our expertise perspective, the more that you help out them, the more that you understand what you need to do to market to them, because they don't have the same traditional channels as most other industries, so it's harder to kind of get your message in front of where you want to message to. So, yeah.
How did you initiate conversations with the school districts?
So I gotta tell you, a lot of that was kind of done prior to me. A lot of times, I kind of work with other people in the community to kind of have that conversation. And honestly, like Eli would be a better person to kind of talk to on that kind of stuff. He's kind of ingrained in the schools in our valley, in the valley. As far as new teachers and stuff, just kind of like going to different events where teachers are at. Like a lot of times teachers will go to coding events, or sometimes they'll even come to other workshop events we run, and just kind of having that networking event and talking to them and telling them what we do, and then trying to get involved and making sure that they understand what we can help them with, and making sure that industry is involved with schools and that kind of stuff. Like you have to just be aware and kind of be a fish and jump around and move around inside the community.
Gotcha. And then, and so if we have, and after you've advertised and you got them coming in and everything, how do you handle the logistics of, for instance, keeping a roll call? Do you just use an Excel spreadsheet, or do you use a database? What level of logistic technology helps you guys out? And how much would be too much, or rather, how much is good enough?
Yeah. So for us, we have two. Well, let me say this. The student R&D organization I mentioned before actually has on staff software developers working on platforms for us. So a lot of the logistical stuff that we have to handle gets dealt with by their platform, which is awesome, because if you didn't have a platform like that, then you'd have to have maybe like a Google Docs or something where people sign up. If you want to collect money, you'd have to figure out a way to integrate it to a website. So there's a lot of logistical things you'd have to figure out there. For student R&D, though, they have an app that they built for us. And I don't know if you want me to screenshot. I can show you what it looks like real quick.
Sure. Yeah, if you share your... Oh, actually, hold on. Let's make sure of something. I think you can do that. There we go. Sort of. Hold on, I'm going to try and fix this up for everybody so they can see this a little better. One moment. On the fly video editing. Real fun. So we'll bring that out. We weren't set up quite for that screen today. Zoom, like we were talking before the show, video conferencing is imperfect at this time. Yes. Okay, so I think we can see right now. There we go. Yeah, we can see a lot better.
So this is the program that they give us as far as organizers. For Phoenix, we're one of our goals for Phoenix is actually to expand to our different cities here in Arizona, so Flagstaff and Tucson. But right now we have this. So this is what it looks like for us as organizers. We know how many students are coming to our events. We know what age ranges they're from, which is knowing the age range of students is huge, because if you can find out what ages they are, you know where to market to. So you can see at least half came from high schools, some from middle schools, and some were a little bit older. If you find yourself trending too young, you can always market more to high schoolers versus middle schoolers and all that kind of fun stuff. But for us, we can easily kind of search for people and check people in here. So this kind of works as our digital roll call. And you can see if we go back, we know 101 here, 148 registered. So we know who's in the event and who's not. And we can easily check them in and out of the event.
So do they go to the website to sign up?
Yeah, so they would go into our website. Let me show you real fast what that looks like. So they would go to our Code Day website, and then right here it says get your ticket, and you click on that, and then it just gives you the information to fill out your stuff here.
Oh, cool.
So all those logistics are handled. It tells you where it's going to be. It also handles all the email logistics for you. So, we have to have them sign a waiver. So the actual student signs a waiver for us. And it says pretty much like, hey, we can use your photos. We can use, we're not liable if you get killed or whatever, which is always so we have all that stuff like that in an online waiver that gets filled out online by the student as they go through this process. And then all that logistics, that just takes off a lot of weight off your shoulders. You just don't have to deal with it anymore.
And is this custom software, or is this this white labeled something?
This is actually custom through this organization, Student R&D.
Cool.
If you want to do a code day in your city, they pretty much accept anybody as long as you can get it started and get the funding going there. They will put you on the platform and let you go. If you're in a city, you probably already have a code day running, and you can always jump in and mentor. If you just go to codeday.org, you can find out if you have one running, and I pull up the list on your own. But yeah.
Cool. So there's a code day. How many code days are there around the country?
I think there's about 24 every 3 months that run.
Wow, that's really interesting. So there's probably something within, driving distance of just about everybody. Well,
yeah,
unless you're in Hawaii.
Yeah. I know Alaska and Hawaii are kind of screwed right now, but and I don't see one in Denver either. Oh no, we got Colorado. So there's Colorado one. So there's lots of different events all over the country, and that happen at those different times.
Right. And I would presume that if you were somebody who wanted to throw these kinds of events, you'd probably have gone to plenty of them by the time you want to throw one, so you know what you're doing. So you'll probably have some connections with the people who are currently doing a code day, and they can sort of help you get involved or get introduced to the student R&D organization and things like that.
Yeah. And if you want an introduction, if someone's interested in running one, you can give them my contact info, and I can definitely introduce them to the organization to start their own.
That's cool.
'Cause I know, like in some places like Anchorage or Hawaii, there's not a lot of community there for these kinds of things, but those are the places that desperately need them. So it's always a great opportunity to to get one started.
Right. So now we've got the whole thing set up, and we've got our we've checked everybody in through our website, and they're all showing up, and they're all at the door, right? You unlock the door, you let them in. What kind of things do you have to deal with while the event's going? I mean, you said something about food, so I presume you have an area for food and stuff like that. Do you listen to people's dietary restrictions beforehand? Can they register and say I have celiac, and you guys would provide that, or would you just presume that they'll bring their own food? How does that work?
I'm gonna stop screen share real fast right here.
Sure.
So as far as logistics go, there's pretty much for us 3 kind of key main logistics periods. There's a start of the event, which is you need to have someone who's going to sit there and sign up students. And because you have waivers and all those other things like that for students, you need to make sure that you have somebody ready to call their parents and be like, hey, is this okay for the student to be here? All that kind of fun stuff like that. You also have the opening ceremonies or the opening talks. So you need to have speakers and people ready to present for that. But then there's food, which is food is probably one of the harder things to coordinate, just because it's very hard to know what the logistics are beforehand. Like if you've never done an event, like how many sodas do you get per student? How many pizzas do you get? Like those are the kinds of questions that really only experience can tell you, because we're not feeding Napoleon's army. We don't know that kind of stuff right offhand. So for us, having done it a bunch of times, we just have a spreadsheet we work off of, and we say, for our snacks, we know, okay, we buy, let's say 6 sodas per student and 5 water bottles or something like that. And we tweak that every single time to make sure that we're running out of soda by the end of the event. Like we don't want to take stuff home because it's just a waste of our resources. Same thing with food. Like how many bananas you need to get, how many oranges. And I remember last time, actually, we had really good feedback because we give our students feedback. But the one feedback that they didn't like was that we ran out of oranges, which I never thought a bunch of, bunch of kids under 20 would tell me that's a negative thing. So I think I lost Jim.
Oh, we're having our traditional 20-minute freeze up. 1 second. All right, just a moment. Should be popping back, I hope. I sure wish he got to choose when it freeze framed for him, Uh-oh, this is a longer pause than usual. I don't know if we lost Alex or not. I think we did. Oh, here he is. Okay. You are muted, so you'll have to unmute real quick. Let me see if I can do that. I'm not sure. There you go. All right, you should be good.
Sorry about that.
All right. Yeah, you're a little quiet now.
Okay. I'll just start talking about it.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, it must have been just something else.
Yeah, so for some reason my Mac likes to disconnect like that sometimes. It's kind of obnoxious.
No, it's all right. So you were talking about the food and how you have to do the prediction of how much food you're going to need. I remember the classic King's Cupcakes algorithm. So there's a certain amount of men in the kingdom, a certain amount of women in the kingdom, and they each eat an exact amount of cupcakes, and you have to calculate it. It's not quite that straightforward for you guys because you have a total variable amount of eating per student. And
Yes.
you really don't want that waste at the end of the day because you have to bring it home. You have to figure out a way to get it out of there, or pay someone else to throw it away, right?
Yeah.
So how do you have any tools to help you with that, or is it just, kind of guesstimating?
There's not really a tool that I know of out there that helps you with that. We've talked to a lot of people in the community who've done these events before. We've also watched our own statistics. We have a spreadsheet, for example, where we mark out what are we going to spend, what are we going to buy. And we pretty much just go to a Sam's Club or a Costco. We do a big pre-order and we get all that stuff shipped to us, so we don't have to deal with it. But what we do is we mark all that down and we make kind of an estimate of okay, we're going to have so many Cokes per student or so many Gatorades and so many waters per student. We expect them to eat this many oranges or this many bananas if we put them out. And those always have to be tweaked because I can tell you last time we had bananas and fruit and we ran out of them middle of the night, and we did not expect that. And we even had a negative comment on our feedback forums that said you ran out of oranges, which I never thought we'd actually ever get a feedback form that said we ran out of oranges.
Wow.
But it was some things like that we really didn't expect. We don't micromanage their food decisions for snacks. And so if they want to come up and get snacks, we'll let them get snacks. And usually they choose more healthy options over unhealthy options. So if you got bananas and oranges and apples, they'll generally pick those up, eat those throughout the nighttime. The other logistical thing you have to look at is your lunches and your breakfasts and your dinners. Your dinners are generally easy. It's a tech event, pizza. There you go. Get pizza. It's easy. We generally go to Costco because the pizza is super cheap and pretty good. And we can generally get, I have to look at my spreadsheet here, but we generally get, I think, 30 or 40 pizzas for our students, depending on the number of people there, and they're generally get eaten. And the other good thing about pizza is that, I could go on a million hours.
We could keep going on about pizza.
But it's good to have leftovers, so you can leave it out and people will eat it through the night. And that's another key thing. You don't want to get cold meat sandwiches because they just don't keep very well throughout the day. And a lot of times you won't have all the food eaten, but kids will come up and say, well, I want to eat something more. And at least you can direct them to the cold pizza because everyone's kind of used to it, right?
Right.
A lot of food you just can't do that with. So
do you guys ever get a freezer and a microwave and keep some Hot Pockets in there or something like that? Or is it always fresh?
Usually it's fresh, like pizza or whatever, but usually we have bags of chips. The other thing we've done recently is we've had our own cookouts. So if you have someone who's really good at cooking and that you have an event venue that lets you, and that's the key thing because There's some venues that will just not let you cook your own food. So you
Right.
have to be very explicit beforehand.
We're talking
Um,
about Alio now, right? Right.
but
He's just such a foodie. I imagine him being the guy who's showing up, showing all the kids, all the really exotic sushi that he brought for the day.
he just won't let us get Jimmy John's. That's his only thing. He just won't let us eat that.
Well,
That's his.
any
That's his.
place that hands out free smells, they can't be
Yes,
right.
for sure. Well, what we found is that the cost of getting like a meal is pretty high. Like if you're looking at a sandwich shop or whatever, you're looking at $300 to $400 for about 100 people.
Hmm.
To do like hot dogs and hamburgers from Costco, you're looking at, I don't know, hot dogs. You can get like 100 hot dogs for $20.
Yeah.
So your cost goes down substantially by just cooking it yourself. And as long as you have a venue that will play along with you, then it's awesome. Like you can do it. And some venues, if you ask, like if you have a venue like a school and you say, hey, we're going to buy the hot dogs, can we hire somebody to cook for us off your staff? Generally, that cost is substantially cheaper than going to a Jimmy John's or a Potbelly to buy sandwiches, because it's just you can maintain all the logistics yourself, and you don't
Right.
pay that markup. So it's something you have to consider as far as like, do you want to put up with having to cook your own food? If you do, it's substantially cheaper. If you just want to hire someone to do it for you, you're paying for that convenience fee.
And folks are allowed to bring their own food too.
They are, but they generally don't at our events. Like some
I
kids
just
bring.
I just mean like in terms of like, certain students that may have celiac or something like that. If they have a true, a dietary need, that they can just bring their own stuff and no problem, right?
Yeah, if they have a dietary need, that they can bring their own stuff. Their parents are welcome to bring food for them throughout the event. Generally, though, we try to have a little bit of either a gluten-free option or also a vegetarian option. We find 10 to 15% of our students have one of those two kind of dietary restrictions. So we'll get salads, and if we get sandwiches or something, we'll get like a vegetarian sandwich, or we make veggie burgers for people and make
Oh,
sure that
cool.
they're labeled. So having those options, you always should have them for people, just to make sure that they don't get left out. But knock on wood, we haven't had any kind of allergic reactions or anything like that
Right.
yet.
But other than gluten-free and vegetarian, vegan, and just regular omnivore food, there's no other sort of things you try to cater for. Nothing you need to so far.
Not right now, no. I mean, honestly, we don't try to do anything like peanuts or anything peanut
Right.
based.
So you just try to keep
That
the allergens out.
Yeah, we try to keep it easy, because if we're doing peanut stuff, that just gets complicated. Like for example, like Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A has a very good charity stuff that they'll put lots of food up for you for very cheap, but they cook everything in peanut oil. So a lot of our organizers are like, that's a non-starter for us.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of that kind of stuff, especially right now. It just seems like kids have way more allergies than they used to, so you have to be aware of that kind of stuff.
Right. So when you're planning for food for an event for a lot of people, you really want to kind of start with what are the food allergens, the main food allergens, and you want to just try to avoid those right away. And then for the things that are like really hard to avoid, like lactose and stuff like that, you offer fruits and vegetables as an alternative. And for folks that can't do gluten, you offer them, well, fruits and vegetables as well, right?
Yeah, and the key thing there is just variety. A lot of the feedback that I've gotten from our events is just they want variety, especially as their kids. Especially as a 24-hour event, they want to have some kind of food. Now, if you're running an event for adults, there's a lot of more options, because adults can leave the venue, they can go out and get their own food. But
Mhm.
kids, you have to keep them locked in. You cannot let them go out.
Right.
So you need to have that variety and option for people.
How about drinks? So I know a lot of parents don't want their kids having caffeine, but a lot of them don't care. So you probably have caffeinated beverages available, right?
Yeah, so we have, the amount we go through a lot of soda, and it's really up to the students if they want to self-regulate themselves. The things we won't provide, we don't provide coffee. That's just not an option. We don't provide that. We have a lot of kids who want it, but we just don't provide it to our students.
Is there a
Um,
reason why you wouldn't provide coffee over like Mountain Dew with their comparable caffeine content?
Part of the reason is that usually with coffee, you're serving in an open cup and it's hot. and
Right, yeah.
that stuff will be spilled.
Okay,
You
so
have,
so anything that can be spilled will be spilled, and if it's hot, it will burn.
yes.
Gotcha.
So we generally like to keep it in cans or in bottles. Um, I don't know. We just always shied away from coffee. Um, and so that's it's kind of a consideration with kids. Like, and it depends on your venue. Like we've had times with venues where we've had like auditoriums, and they, kids being kids, midnight kicks around and they like to run around the auditorium and they're going to spill a drink. So you'd rather have it spill in a can because maybe it won't get all over the place versus
Right.
a cup everywhere. So it's a consideration you have to make. But as far as drinks, we do sodas, we do Gatorade, we do juice boxes. Juice boxes are a huge request every single time for kids. They love juice boxes, and you can get them for cheap. And then just water, lots and lots of water for them. Making sure you have water fountains available and ways for them to refill the water bottles when they're done.
You mentioned that the kids can't leave, so they're locked in. Are there any other security protocols that you use in order to keep everybody safe?
Yeah, so the locked in, we have some rules on our own, like don't be in the same, like if you're a mentor or a volunteer, you cannot be in a room with a student by yourself. You have to have at least another student or another mentor in that room just for security purposes. We do background checks on our 24-hour mentors, so there's no kind of weird stuff going on there. And we generally, like a lot of venues, they have security personnel on site. So those security personnel will be monitoring our main doors. A lot of places won't let us lock doors, but when they do, we lock everything except for a couple exits, or make sure that they're fire exits so that they can get out in case of a fire. But we just make sure that we always have somebody watching the doors. Like if you have 5 doors, you need to make sure someone's watching those doors, or at least having the visibility on those doors so that people can't walk out on their own.
So you need at least one staff member per door.
In general, yeah. I mean, if their doors like across the building through 2 doors, it's not going to be the same
Right.
thing. But if they're in high visibility areas, you need to have somebody there watching those things.
Well, you need somebody that's taking account of how many kids are there and making sure nobody's leaving and that nobody extra is there that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, it's generally good to do something like that. Yeah, and
is that
also,
part of the
like,
reason why the 300 kid event was really hard to do?
the 300 events, when you get to that many students, your biggest problem is going to become, first off, the food scale becomes huge. Feeding that many people becomes huge. The costs go exponential in those situations. It's not necessarily, I mean, maybe not exponential, but you do end up having other considerations. And then the last reason is presentations. If you have 300 people presenting projects, the amount of time it takes is insane. Like it's
Right.
it's like hours and hours of people presenting projects, and it just becomes boring for everyone to watch, and then you can't control them. So having a smaller group means less presentations, which means faster walkthroughs and faster event.
And you think 120 is an ideal size for you guys so far?
For us, yeah. 120 has been good. That means about 20 to 25 projects that get presented. And when that happens, we can generally get through them in about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Although we can come back to that in a second.
What would it take for you guys to get a very smooth running 300 person event? Because you were saying, the increase in complexity and staff needs and things like that isn't necessarily linear. It's not necessarily exponential, but it gets really high at some point. Is it that it's just that for your kinds of venues and what you're doing, 120 is ideal for you? Or do you think that Code Day events, in general, are more ideal at 120 visitors or students?
Personally, having seen the bigger ones versus the smaller ones, I think that you need to have a little bit smaller, intimate atmosphere. The control really isn't much of a problem. Like I thought you'd have to control a lot of kids; it'd be kind of chaotic. But for the most part, they do their work and they do participate in the event. You just have a higher percentage as you get more students of having those unruly students you've got to deal with. And you have to be aware of that as you get more people. There's a small percentage that you're going to have to deal with that are going to be unruly and kind of disruptive. But it's not going to be everybody. But it does grow. The other thing is just having the mentor staff. like with 100 students, having 39 people on staff as mentors is a good ratio. But they're not there the whole time. So when you get to later at night, at like midnight to 4 in the morning, most kids don't sleep. And because of that, you need to still have a good coverage on your floor to make sure that people are okay and people can get help. And getting mentors for 300 at midnight to 5 in the morning is near impossible. No one wants to stay up that late and work.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Especially as adults. So that's, I mean, you just have if you can get a bunch of good mentors that work all night, then you're good.
I think you got cut out one more time. Boy, when you come back and you see the freeze frames that you've been stuck on, oh man.
There we go.
Man, when you review this video and you see the freeze frames, I apologize. I wish that you could choose when that thing was going to freeze, you know?
Just don't Photoshop anything in my mouth.
Yeah, I know, right? Do any students' parents come as chaperones, or are they even allowed?
We generally recommend against having parents come as chaperones. We have, like, if there's a school going, the schools will always send like their teachers to stay with the students the whole time. But generally, parents, we kind of just discourage parents from staying.
Right.
And I think in the last couple of years, I've had like 2 parents who stayed the whole time. Most are just kind of like, here you go.
I mean, is it one of those problems where basically they're the parent and you don't want to have to explain to them that you need technically to do a background check on them to let them just be free roaming in there? Is it something like that, or is it more of like just they interfere with their kids' learning or something?
It's kind of like I mean, I would rather just give them that opportunity to like kind of be a little bit more free in those situations and not have their parents kind of like
you haven't met a parent so far that doesn't take advantage of not having their kid around for an evening.
Well, most of them do, so it's awesome. But yeah, like I guess it hasn't been too much of a problem. And if they do insist on staying, then that's fine. They can stay and they can stay there the whole night and sleep the whole night there. And that's up to them. But for the most part, it's generally not been that big of an issue. It's not like you have to deal with it 90% of the time. You have to deal with it 1 or 2% of the time. And when you do, it's more of like just reassuring that we have people on staff that know CPR, that know how to deal with problems, and we're here and we're going to make sure we call you if a problem happens.
And do you have like an auto defibrillator on hand and things like that?
No,
not even.
I mean, if the building has it, most buildings do. We know where they're at, but we keep a first aid kit, and our general rule is we'll call the parent as soon if anything happens. But we've had lots of events, we've never had any kind of medical issues.
Right.
So far, so
that's great. So the kids ate all the food. They've programmed for like let's say 12 hours or something like that. You said that they can also sleep at some point if they want to. So there's probably an area where people can set up a sleeping bag or something like that. Is that like a place away from everything, or do they have to learn how to sleep in the lights and stuff like that?
Yeah, so we usually have like if we do an event for 100 people, we'll have 3 or 4 rooms that they're working in, and then we'll have a sleep room that we designate. That sleep room also works as kind of a dual speaking room. So we'll have like someone who goes in, like we'll do speakers throughout the time so people can kind of learn some more stuff that they might not know. And so we'll kind of use that at night to have that as a sleeping spot. And we'll just turn the lights off there. We have someone always monitoring that room because you're dealing with 15 and 16-year-olds and sometimes their boyfriend, girlfriend. So you do have to be aware of.
You got to see if there's 2 people in one sleeping bag.
Yeah, you don't want any code day babies, as we call it. So
I presume we're talking about the older students.
Yeah. You have to be aware of that and just like make sure that people aren't like too close to each other. You got to play the captain.
Sure, I mean, it's the same thing as like a school, any kind of a junior high or grade school or anything. Yeah. PDA isn't allowed only because it's not like you're trying to say, hey, we're against you having a girlfriend or anything. It's just that's not why you're here. You're here to hang out and learn about code and stuff like that. When you go home, you can smooch your girlfriend all you want, right?
And so we in those situations, we just always like to have somebody like in that room and just kind of on their laptop or something, make sure nothing weird's happening.
Right.
But I can tell you, like most students end up just kind of rolling their sleeping bag out and going underneath the table, and sleeping there. Like, and they'll just kind of stay underneath the table with the lights on. So it's
Right
really
on.
not, like, it's half and half. Who'll take advantage of those rooms and who won't.
Right. So now they've slept or they didn't sleep and they have 9 cans of empty Mountain Dew in front of their thing. Actually, before I get there, I want to go back to one thing you were talking about. You said in the very beginning you had presenters, and you had just mentioned them again. What kind of presenters, other than the sponsors, come up, and what kind of things do they talk about usually with the kids?
Yeah, so we try to have lots of different topics so that they can learn about a bunch of different things. This time, for example, we have one on VR that's going to last about an hour. We have one on legal, kind of, hacking and legal stuff. We have one on design, like how do you build a user experience and how do you listen to your customers and stuff. So we run the gamut on stuff that we think would be useful to them, and we try to mix it up so that the people who come regularly don't get the same speakers. We always are like talking to people in the community saying, hey, do you want to do a talk on Blender, or do you want to do a talk on GIMP, or do you want to like train on these things? And we try to have them come in to do different topics. Excuse me. A lot of times what we've also found very useful is that if you do with students, if you have a couple required talks, so let's say you have, like at the start, sometimes we'll do like a intro to like a construct. Then we'll have a talk on project management, like how to use Trello, how to use Kanban, and then we'll have a talk on brainstorming and Googling things. And we try to like rotate them through that within the first 45 minutes of the event so they can get a couple just quick little guidance lessons on here's the basics and maybe here's some stuff that you didn't know about. And what we found is that people, when they start learning about Kanban and like how to manage a project, the kids take on to it really quickly. And it's really awesome to see like Kanban boards all across the room and seeing people moving things down the thing and managing those projects in a different way than they ever thought possible. So
Right.
It definitely sticks with them.
So we have I'm going to give the audience a 15-minute warning. If you guys have any audience questions for Alex, I want you to go ahead and type them in here, and I'll go ahead and ask Alex those once they're in there. In the meantime, Alex, after all of these presenters are done, everybody's done their stuff, they've drank all the Mountain Dew, they've ate all the oranges, and they've left you the negative comment. Then what? Is it cleanup time? So everybody goes home. I presume, people show up and prove that they own that kid, right? And then they get to take the kid home or whatever. And then the kids are gone. What's the first step after the last kid's out the door?
Well, I'm gonna take a step back there. What we do we'll start about 9 o'clock in the morning. 8 o'clock in the morning. We do have presentations that we let the students give. And what we do is we have a panel of judges. We usually get about 5 to 6 judges from the community to actually judge their projects. And one of the things we found very early on is that you need to have a tech check really well down. Like one time we did an event with like 30 different groups. And we didn't have a tech check. So we didn't check out their laptops. We didn't check out their connectors. And it was just chaos, like trying to get everyone going through in that time period. So you want to have a good time where you just say, hey, come up to the projector, make sure it plugs in correctly, make sure your screen casts correctly, make sure your software actually works. Then we go through a presentation. We give them 5 minutes, which you need to adjust that. You want to keep it down to less than an hour presentation. So you should adjust that between 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how many students you have and how many groups you have. And you pretty much let them have a time to talk to the judges. And then the judges ask questions about their projects, ask them how long they've been coding, all that kind of fun stuff like that. Judges go out and then they deliberate and kind of talk about the projects and which ones are the best. And as that's all going on, you have a few mentors who are just cleaning and just like going through every workstation, throwing away all the sodas, getting the chairs back in order. Because if you don't do that as the presentation is going on, you're going to spend another 4 or 5 hours, not 4 or 5 hours, maybe 2 or 3 hours cleaning after it's done. So we always have like people like on call at that very last time to sit down and say, go through, pick up all the trash, make sure all the computers look good, make sure we have all the computers back in stock. And so that way we can get out really quickly. We don't have to spend a lot of time cleaning.
Right.
So that's the main thing.
Are the kids exceptionally dirty, or is it just a matter of scale that causes you to have to be there for 2 to 3 hours for cleanup?
Part of it is just making sure everything's in order. Like you definitely don't want to piss a venue off. You don't want to leave it dirty, even though they've got people who are going to clean it. Even if they tell you they're going to clean it, I'm very into the philosophy of like leave it better than what you found it. So I kind of get a little OCD about it and make sure that like, okay, the chairs are straightened, the computers are plugged in correctly.
Right.
There's no cans on the floor, all the trash is taken out.
So you take the Burning Man approach to these events, and you leave no trace behind.
Yes. Well, we try to leave no trace. The times we leave traces are like if we made a decision last time to have popcorn for a midnight snack, and that was an awful decision because
it's like giving them a giant bag of peanuts and just saying throw them on the floor.
Yeah. So we try to give them things that they don't need to clean up much. And another thing we do throughout the event is we just walk around our trash bags and we just make sure we are throwing things away all the time so that things don't just get piled up. So as long as you're maintaining your environment, then it's it makes sure that you don't have any issues at the end of it, and you can get out relatively quickly.
Right. Do you have a set checklist for the end of the night to make sure that you're definitely good with your venue?
No, not necessarily. It's more of just kind of a visual walkthrough of the place, and it honestly can depend on your venue. The last venue we had computers that we could use from their venue, but their network didn't necessarily work the greatest on wireless, so we were telling the students just to unplug the Cat5 out of the back of the computers that they were sitting at and plug it into their laptop. So we just had to go through and make sure that those were all plugged back in. Mm-hmm. So those are the kinds of things that you really can't checklist for. It's just kind of on the fly. You gotta make sure.
Well, we have no audience questions at the moment. I want to give you all one last warning. If you have a question about code event organizing, teaching kids, and also anything having to do with his personal interests, you had said you're interested in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and you could probably get suckered into a conversation about that, right? And also software development management. Which I think that would be a good generic term for the team lead, right?
Yeah.
So if you guys have any questions about that kind of stuff, make sure you ask Alex. We only have a couple more minutes with him, and I want to make sure I get all your questions in. We do have, let's see here. Yeah, we do have one question from Angry Knees. He says he imagines that having a large group of kids in an enclosed area for an extended period of time could lead to, you getting sick or your people getting sick. Do you guys take some, vitamin C or something beforehand, or is this a problem, or is it not really?
I really haven't seen it as much of a problem. I do know that we have, most of the time we'll have what's it called? I can't think of it now. We'll have I can't think. I don't know the name of it. Product, but it's like a cleaning solution that you can just put on your hands and you don't need to wash it or anything like that.
Like Purell?
Yeah, like a Purell.
Yeah, right.
But we have never had a situation where people got sick or whatever.
So people don't usually, it's not like a common occurrence for people to get a cold or something like that.
No, not what we found. And we've had times where kids are like, oh, they don't feel good or whatever. They'll have stomach aches or something like that. And a lot of times it's just a matter of making sure that we ask them, what do you want to do? Do you want to go home? Do you want me to call your parents? Or a lot of times if it's 3:00 in the morning and they're having a stomach ache, you just got to tell them to go take a nap, because you just get that way when you get, you've drunk a lot of Coke. You've not stayed up this much ever in your life. You got to go take a nap. You know what I mean? And that generally helps. So I'm just being wise about it.
Do you see that, do you see, well, I guess you already actually answered that question. We have another question too. I'm not sure, you had said that you're interested in artificial intelligence and machine learning. This sounds kind of like an academic question about it. You want to try field this one? It's, he's just saying, that the academic field for machine learning is reserved mostly for people with PhDs. Do you see it be, opening up to more, regular software developers like myself?
That's a good question. And honestly, I feel like it's slowly doing that. And I feel like as we continue to, when you look out in the industry right now, a lot of companies have released tools to do it, but it's still a little bit dense on how to work with it. And so you still have to really play with it. and kind of like tweak it a little bit. Like, I mean, you look at it like I think Baidu released something, and Google's releasing something, and a bunch of other software companies are also. But it's still kind of more academic and theory versus being practical. It's not as easy necessarily to plug in as just a library or something right now. And that's something I hope to see more in the future, especially as we get more reliant on the systems on those kinds of things.
So we had a previous guest on, and I know that you know her full name, so we're going to not say that. But she's the one who does the Steam. We talked about it before. You know who I'm talking about. And she was on here talking. Well, she's the biotechnologist. We know who we're talking about now. But she was on here before. Oh, you might have cut out, so I'm going to give you a second to come back before I ask this. And you might not want to ask. He might not want to answer this one. He might have just turned it off. He was just like, I see where this is going. Ending this now. All right, just a moment. We're going to give Alex a couple more minutes. Or a couple more seconds here. In the meantime... Oh, there he is. All right, let's get you unmuted again. All right, there you go.
All right, sorry about that.
All right, no problem. I'm not sure if it's going to readjust your volume or what, but you didn't do anything to it last time and it fixed itself, right?
Yeah.
All right, then don't worry about it. Okay, so the question I was asking was, our previous guest was a biotechnologist, and she she talked a lot about vaccinations and things like that. And this is a question that I totally am cool with you dodging if you'd like to. But the question is that, do you see it being one of those things in the future? Because you said that you don't see a bunch of kids getting sick, and this isn't a thing that's happening at your events, right? But schools are now starting to, mandate vaccination schedules and things like that for certain people to be able to get together in a certain room. Do you ever see it getting to that, or has anybody talked about that kind of a thing in that context? Or is this just a totally the first time you've ever heard this brought up?
It's probably the first time, and I'd say that, it's an interesting thing, but you'd never, probably in an event outside of school, be able to actually collect that information from the students to make sure that they're vaccinated.
Gotcha.
The logistics of that would be it'd be really hard.
It would be kind of an intrusive type of a thing in the context of what you guys are doing, right? Yeah. So in that case, I guess you'd have to just presume that somebody who is immunocompromised would know that they ought not to go to a room full of random people and stay there 24 hours with them, right?
Yeah, if I see smallpox in the audience, I'll send them home.
Right. But even if, for instance, if you have an immunocompromised grandmother who's living at your house and you come to an event like that, you could come home with influenza, right? And if that's the case, maybe if you are in one of those houses, just be aware that vaccination schedules are not even they're not that data's not collected, and so buyer beware, in other words, caveat emptor, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where there's a level of, I think there's a level that you have to kind of just rely on people on those kinds of things, because look, if you go to a Comic-Con or something like that, there's 100,000 people in the room. I don't know if that guy with the Star Trek outfit down below or down near me has all his vaccinations, you know what I mean? And he's coughing. So it's, there's a level of trust I think we have in society. Now that's getting kind of eroded with kind of anti-vaccinations and stuff like that. But, it happens. So.
Sure. And it just, the important thing for me was I was just wondering whether or not this was something that you could collect data on, if it's something, because you cater to a lot of different things like gluten-free, stuff like that. And so it just seemed like, this was like sort of the natural progression of what people are eventually going to demand for an event, And so I was just seeing if it was there or not, or if anybody even talked about it. All right. So
I think those things, just real quick, because I think those things are things that always come up after something happens. It's
right.
I think a lot of events will never ask for that until the next plague breaks out at a convention or something, and then everyone's gonna require that.
Right.
So I think it's one of those things where we can still be ignorant about it and kind of like push it off to the side for now.
What is your experience with artificial intelligence and machine learning? Have you used things like TensorFlow or PyTorch or anything like that?
I haven't played too much around with those things. I've been playing around with it a little bit from a natural language perspective, mainly from a HR. I want to be able to provide customers with a little bit better HR systems that are a little bit more natural. So one of the things I've been playing around with is, the hateful PTO request. Trying to make up a way to just text in a PTO request that's a little bit more natural to the user to say something like, hey, take your next week off. And the system just knows what that means.
Right.
And then kind of taking all these different varieties. And those are kinds of things where it's not major research, but it's kind of like, it's a cool feature that you can provide to customers so that they can, interact with a system that's a little bit more natural than having to fill a form out.
Right. One of our audience members asked if you teach AI classes. We did ask you that earlier in regards to the kids, and you said that nobody's really asked for artificial intelligence, but that you'd be happy to, explore it with them if it was something that they asked for. Other than that, are you involved with any groups that are, just like local meetups or anything like that? How did you get started with your exploration of machine learning?
So for me, I'm not involved in any kind of groups yet. I would like to be if there's any great ones in the Valley. For me, I think it's trying to come to some kind of solution of a problem, and I think that's the whole reason you program is there's some kind of problem out there, and I'm always keeping that on my back wheelhouse to solve a problem. One of the things that we look at from an insurance perspective is how do we match the correct plan to the right person? And those are the areas that we're kind of exploring right now to see how we can make it easier to say, okay, this group of people needs a $2,000 deductible, and this group of people needs a $5,000 deductible. They need co-pays and these don't. So those are kinds of areas that I'm exploring. Have I gotten very deep into them? Not really. But
So
those
it's
are
like
kinds of areas.
automating the adjuster, kind of?
Automating more of the sale of it and the selection of it, because the process right now of actually selecting what insurance you get at a business is actually quite intensive. And that's mainly because the insurance carriers themselves are not very clear. They're not very easy to work with.
Forthright.
Yeah, no, they're awful, to say the least. And so as a company like ours, we deal with, let's say, 30 different insurance carriers. So we have something like 300 or 400 different plans that we can offer to a client, and choosing what's the best option for those things requires manual human effort. And so we want to just figure out a way we can better kind of teach a computer to do that for us. So we don't have to do that every single time that we have a quote. And
Right.
that adds up to thousands of man hours a year. So
this is a totally unfair question because I'm going to ask you just right on the spot, but what's the most fascinating thing in technology to you right now?
most fascinating thing to me, I think automated cars are, mainly because I look at things from not only a technology perspective, but also just a economic perspective. I love behavioral economics. That's one of I could do a whole other show with you on behavioral economics, so that I'm fascinated by it. But I could see economics and the self-driving cars and just what impact it will make on our society. And it just fascinates me to think, that I'm hoping in 10 years I don't have to drive a car, and that I don't have to teach my kid how to drive a car, because it seems crazy that we do it right now. You know what I mean? Same thing with logistics. Like if you think about it with logistics, as a company, you could cut out so much cost by just getting rid of your drivers. It sounds evil, but at the same time, it's just natural, growth of the economy and the growth of the marketplace.
Well, the other argument I have against that, whenever I hear that, is that sitting on your butt and driving down a highway as your career and putting your life at risk and everyone else's life at risk, it's not really that great of a job. And I understand that there's some people who love big rigs and that they love to do that. But I have to imagine there's a lot more people who are just doing it as a job. And then, they're not like, kids who grew up being fascinated in, train engines or something like that, right? They didn't, it's not like they grew up wanting to be a truck engineer. It's that and some of them did. I absolutely can accept that. But for the most part, you're sitting constantly, that's not very healthy. You're having to keep very alert the whole time. One small mistake is a pretty catastrophic, terrible thing to have to deal with. It's just not even that great of a job, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to make too big of an assumption on that, but I agree at some level with you. I don't want truck driver trying to come and kill me or whatever, but
well, I guess my whole point is that if they do love the trucks, wouldn't they rather just drive the truck for fun and have, some other, who would want to make their fun, the thing that they find the most fun into their actual career?
Yeah.
We all know that kind of ruins it.
Yeah. And I think the key thing there is, like, first off, there's Euro Truck Simulator 2, and there's American Truck Simulator that you can play to get that fun out of the driving. But also, for me, the fascinating part of it is just the huge impact that it could make on our society. And like, if you think about all the people related to just the automotive industry, think about insurance companies like State Farm or Geico or whatever, like those would almost have no reason to exist after that. Like, they have to pivot, they have to change. And this is a huge impact on our society that it's fascinating to think about. Even if it doesn't ever happen, it's fascinating to think about it from a speculative, almost like a sci-fi perspective, and just fun to kind of toy around in.
Do you sort of see? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
Do you sort of see a difference between disruptive and impactful?
Is there a difference? Not really, because I think anything can be disruptive. Just depends.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So, but that's the thing that really fascinates you about different kinds of technology, is what kind of a impact or what kind of disruption it can make to the current status quo.
Yeah, that's those kinds of things, like things that could impact society, or disrupt society,
Right.
are they're fun to think about. They're fun experiments to have a conversation about and to think about, and also just to sit down and say, what can I actually do to have this happen, or what can I do in the real world to make sure that these kinds of things can become reality.
Right. Well, Alex, are there any parting, words of wisdom or warnings for people who would like to throw these events, or anything you'd like to say to the audience before we go?
As far as, I think they're extremely rewarding to run. I never really got into the intrinsic value of running events. Like, you do see growth from students, and you do have people who know you every single time you come back and run one of these things. You see the people growing, and you see people doing things with their life that they didn't know they could do before. And you also just see, like, the small impact you can make by asking the right question. And I think that that's huge in our society and huge in our community. And that's one of the cool things about being a developer and kind of being in this industry, is that by asking questions, you can make a big impact. So I think it's just a natural extension of kind of what we do.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Alex. If you ever have any new things that you're doing with either Code Day or other events or anything else you'd like to talk about, heck, if you want to come back on here and we want to do a true, machine learning or artificial intelligence geek out, because I'm a layman when it comes to that stuff. So, when it comes to talking about it, I need somebody who knows what they're talking about to lead that. So anytime you want to come back on here and talk, let us know, and we'll let you go now. But thank you very much for coming on the show, Alex.
Yep. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Take care.
All right. Bye.
All right, everybody. We are going to try and do this right. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been on the air, and so, of course, I'm screwing everything up. There we go. All right. So yeah, that was our interview with Alex. He's he's an event coordinator or event organizer for the Arizona Code Day, and he just gave us all the information we need in order to throw our own code events or to learn about where to find a code event. He talked to us a little bit about machine learning and stuff like that, which was really cool. And he's just an overall really cool guy. So if you missed the interview, make sure you go back onto our Twitch past broadcasts, or we also upload them onto YouTube, and check out the whole interview.